I had just gotten out of an 8-year abusive relationship and met someone on a popular online dating app. To be honest, I wasn't particularly looking for anything serious, just someone to go and watch a movie or have a drink with every now and then. I had 2 boys and was happy and living a peaceful life on my own after going through all that hell. I meet this guy who's just a couple years older than me. He had turned his life around apparently. When he was younger, he used to be in gangs and drugs, and now he was all into working out and staying real fit, doing lots of family stuff as well. I guess you could say I kind of felt protected by him. He was a hard worker, very self-sufficient, and had a son too. He really loved going to the gym every day. I myself had kind of a crazy past, but also overcame it, so I thought we might seem like a good fit. We would go to dinner, movies, normal dating stuff. Eventually, he wanted to spend more and more time together. Well, I was having trouble giving up all my free time for him, and he would get really angry about this, like extremely angry. After being with a controlling, possessive asshole for so long prior, this was obviously a red flag. After about 3 months, I told him I did not want to see him anymore. When I told him this, he said he needed to confess something to me. He admitted to me that he was using steroids, and that was the reason for his bizarre mood swings. He cried and said he was sure that was the reason. He was willing to stop if it meant he could have another chance. I obliged, but only under the condition that we remain just friends. Things were okay for a while after. We saw each other maybe every other week or so. Once again, he started wanting to see me every week though. I told him I was not interested in being anything other than friends at the moment. I was really not ready for another committed relationship. He tried really hard to talk me into giving him another chance, but I just couldn't find myself interested in him in a romantic way. I insisted we just remain friends. I stopped talking to him altogether. I got mad at his insistence that we talk every single day. That's what friends do, apparently. He started to always question my whereabouts and ask for pictures of who I was hanging out with. I told him very sternly that's not what friends do. Every single time he would just innocently insist that he wanted to see what I was up to. Fast forward 6 months later, I hadn't spoken to him at all during this time. I was just happy and living my best life. On one particular night when my youngest son was at his dad's, I went out to a local bar with friends. My oldest son, who was 13 at the time, was home alone, so I left a little bit early to make it home around 10 p.m. I laid down in bed and went to sleep pretty much right away. Now, a little bit of info on my living situation. I had been living in my condo for almost a year now. We lived in a great, safe community. I would leave my sliding glass patio door open with the screen door closed. This was to get a good breeze in at night. I didn't really think it was a big deal. My bedroom was really close to the patio. My son would sleep in the loft that was closest to the front door. I was dead asleep when I suddenly felt someone slowly sit down on my bed. I was laying there, wondering why my son would come sit down on my bed so slowly, like he was trying not to wake me up. I realized he would not. I turned around, and it was not my son. It was Mario, not his real name, by the way, laying down in bed next to me. I sat up and asked him immediately how he'd managed to get in. He would not answer me. Instead, he said, "I needed to talk to you." Okay, well, when you need to talk to someone, don't just sneak into their room while they're sleeping. You call them or leave a note or something, literally anything but this. I was thinking to myself that I was going to kill my kid for letting him into the house. "Well, I didn't have your number anymore, and I needed to talk to you before it's too late." I didn't even entertain the before it's too late bit. I was livid, but something told me to keep my cool in this moment. I sat up in bed. "Look, I really want to talk to you too, but not like this. Please, just leave and I promise we'll talk tomorrow. Call me tomorrow, okay?" He got up and walked over to my side of the bed. He started rubbing my shoulders and was slowly making his way to my neck. He whispered into my ear, "Do you really want to talk?" I looked him in the eyes. "Yes, I've been wanting to talk to you, but not like this. Please, tomorrow, okay?" He began to rub my neck, then went back down to my shoulders and let go suddenly. "Okay." The motherfucker proceeded to exit through my patio door and jump my patio wall. This told me exactly how he'd gotten in. I freaked the fuck out, of course. I checked on my kid and he had no idea what was going on. Locked all my doors and couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next day, I texted him and told him if I ever saw him near me or in my complex again, I would call the police. Don't ever contact me again. If you're wondering why I didn't call the cops to begin with, I knew he had a gun, so A, I was scared of being retaliated against for being a snitch. And B, I figured if I called the cops, they would probably not do much or just let him out, and I was afraid of what he would do after that. Either way, surprisingly enough, he did leave me alone, and I didn't hear from him again for years. 4 years later, though, I'm going through Facebook when I see his face in the People You May Know section. I click on the picture and notice it looked a lot like a jail picture. You know, those pictures where the person is clearly in a jail cell? I scrolled down the page. His most recent post was him posting his address for his family members to write to, a prison address. So, I Google his name. Sure enough, the first thing that pops up are articles after articles with the exact same headline. Man arrested on suspicion of killing girlfriend. About 2 years after him and I dated, he shot and killed the next girl he was dating. That very easily could have been me. I felt like shit after, thinking if there was anything I could have done to stop this. Even scarier, though, is that he only got 12 years for her murder in the end. About 5 years ago, I was living at home with my parents and my twin brother was there too. Every morning at around 7 a.m., we would both head out for a daily run. We had mapped out this giant loop that we would run. To make it a bit of a competition, I would run it in one direction, and my twin would run it in the other direction. That way, we could both run and stay focused. Part of this loop was on the main street of the city my parents live in. On this main road, there were these shady apartments, kind of hidden away by a bunch of trees. The direction I was running, the view of these apartments was obscured by a giant hedge bush. I couldn't see the apartments until I was basically right in front of them. As I started my run, out of my peripheral vision, I could see a woman standing among the trees staring at me. Immediately, I got chills and didn't turn to face her. Something about the way her body was unnerved me, and also I didn't want to be rude. I ran on and mostly forgot about this until a few minutes later. I passed my twin about 10 minutes later. He was going the opposite direction as I. Well, I get home and my twin hasn't come back yet. I go about the rest of my morning routine, including taking a shower. I hop out and my twin has still not arrived back home yet. I was starting to get a bit worried now. An hour after I had gotten home, he was still not back. I called him to check on what was happening. He told me he was on his way back now, and he had something he needed to tell me and my parents. When he finally got home, he told us that as he was running in front of these apartments, he could see a woman hanging from the trees in front of this area. As soon as it was obvious he had seen her body, a man came sprinting out of the apartments wailing and screaming, "No, I can't believe she did this!" He grabbed her body and laid her on the ground and started performing CPR. It was very obvious the man was her husband. My brother, of course, called the local police. They dispatched an ambulance and police officers as well. My brother had to stay for questioning and give a witness report and all that jazz. Obviously, he was very troubled of the sight of the woman hanging there. Since he was going the opposite way I was going, he didn't have that big hedge obscuring his view and got a straight view of this woman hanging in that tree. It's hard for me to believe that the woman I saw staring at me out of my peripherals was in fact dead the entire time. I did find it a bit sketchy as well. How coincidental it was that the husband came running out the instant it was obvious someone had discovered her body. It's a bit too convenient if you ask me, but then again, I don't want to definitively say the man killed his wife without any evidence or anything. I imagine it would be ridiculously hard to hang somebody unwillingly from a tree, so I don't really know what to say. My brother never really followed up with the police, leading me to believe the death was ruled a suicide. Still though, I just can't fathom that if I would have simply turned around to face this woman, I would have discovered she was dead 20 minutes earlier than my twin had. It deeply troubles me that I didn't. When I was 15 years old, I had the aspirations of becoming a model. I was 4'10", Asian, and had crooked teeth as well, so looking back, I wonder why I ever thought that was a good idea. Either way though, my mom always believed in me, and would help me put together a portfolio and paid for all my agency fees too, and they were not cheap. When I realized that my agency didn't care to book me for any gigs because I wasn't a good fit for anything, I searched for gigs myself. Keep in mind I was only 15, so I wasn't the most discerning person. I joined up with this website where models could contact photographers and vice versa. I was contacted by many photographers, and one particular guy stood out to me. He told me he would pay me for the hour and travel, since he lived about 3 hours away from me. I thought that was a great deal. I talked to my mom about the opportunity, and she agreed to take me if my dad and sister could come too. I agreed, although I did feel like it was going to look unprofessional. When we arrived to this place, this guy's house was in a wooded area with no neighbors around. It was a very big house though. Honestly, probably the biggest I've ever seen at that point in my life. He had a barn to the side that was bigger than my actual house. When we went to his door, his wife answered it. She seemed like a normal, nice, white, stay-at-home mom. She told us to sit in the living room while we waited. The furniture and everything was so nice. I felt bad for even sitting down on it. Her husband came out, and to be honest, I forgot what he even looked like. They were both such normal-looking white people to me. His wife was folding laundry. Everything just seemed so casual. I noticed she was folding children's clothes, but they didn't seem to have any kids around. I also didn't remember her mentioning anything about having kids either. The man took us into his office, and we did all the paperwork. He had tax forms and all this other stuff that seemed legit enough. Now I felt less afraid about being slaughtered in the Wisconsin woods with my whole family. The weird thing though was that he asked what my stage name would be. Why the fuck would I need a stage name for these pictures? Once the paperwork was done, he took us to his barn to look at the studio. It was huge and also looked super legit. He had clothing racks full of costumes, bright lights, computers. It was pretty overwhelming. When I started, he told me I could change since I'd brought my own clothes. I was super nervous, of course, since the only experience I had in modeling was having my aunt take pictures of me in the backyard. The photographer said to my family, "Kids are usually nervous if their family is watching them. Are you guys fine with stepping out for a bit?" They agreed. My dad told me in our language to scream if anything happened because they'd be right there. I figured I'd be fine. That was until the photographer casually said to me, "Can you pull your sleeve down over your shoulder? It's okay if a nipple shows, I can just Photoshop it out." Immediately, I got the heebie-jeebies. After about 5 minutes, I asked him if I could take a break. He agreed and asked if I wanted to see the pictures. When I gazed at them, they didn't look like the super professional photography photos I was expecting. They looked super fucking average. My aunt was only 17 and she was taking way better pictures of me than this guy. He asked if I wanted to do some more. I told him I wanted to talk to my parents first. I told my mom I didn't want to do this anymore. They somehow managed to get me out and drove me home. It was very silent. I think my parents knew what was going on. My sister had told me that when she tried to go into the barn to check up on me, the door was locked shut. I later found out that the website he was running was actually a child pornography site. He had to pay to unlock the photos. It was this big, huge scandal. His website was full of kids in swimming suits looking like adults on his homepage. All the girls had stage names too. Now it made sense why he and his wife had come off as too perfect and lived in such a huge house. They were profiting off naive young girls' dreams. I'm just grateful my parents loved me enough to not push me further into that shit. I know most of those girls did not want to do that kind of stuff. Oh, and the dude never paid us for the food or travel either. In fact, he actually stole my birth certificate because we'd accidentally left it in his office when we went to take the photos. I hope he died shortly after, or got arrested at least. Now I'm afraid to take professional photos subconsciously, and I never want to be in the spotlight ever again. Trigger warning. This story contains descriptions of domestic violence. Years ago, I pushed really hard to make sure my daughter got a cell phone at a pretty early age, around 12 years old. My former spouse didn't really understand why this was such a huge deal for me. I couldn't really explain it at the time either, but I had my reasons why I needed her to have a phone. Part of this was from my own experience as a young 14-year-old babysitter. I loved babysitting for Jack and Diane. Not only were they the coolest couple ever, but their kids were really sweet and fun too. They had a little toddler boy, Matt, and John, the little baby. Jack was a biker, and he often picked me up on his Harley. That was the most amazing thing ever, and his wife loaned me a lot of her leather clothes to wear to rock concerts. They went out partying a lot, and paid really well too. It was like a dream job almost. They were out clubbing that night. I had put Matt to bed and rocked John off to sleep. It was a cold night, so they had taken the Mercedes instead of the bike. It was so late. Even with checking on the sleeping kids regularly, I was starting to get sleepy myself. That was never really an issue though. They didn't seem to mind at all if I dozed off to sleep, which I did on this night. I woke up with a start, heart pounding. I had no idea at first what had woken me up. Neither of the kids woke up and there was no noise either. For whatever reason though, I was wide awake and terrified. I had just started to get my panic under control when I heard a car door slam shut. I looked out the window. I saw they were now home, so I went to open the front door. As Diane came inside, I could see one side of her face was horribly swollen, and she was bleeding profusely as well. Stupidly, I asked, "Did you get in a fight or something?" She raced past me to the phone at the dining room table and started dialing. It was a heavy old tabletop-style phone. Jack came in next, flying past me and screaming. I saw him grab the phone receiver from her hand and smash it into the side of her head. Blood splattered across the wall. He ripped the phone out of it entirely. She was screaming now, holding her bloody face. He started smashing her head into the wall. Then she staggered, gushing blood into the bedroom out of sight. I could hear more screaming and the hideous sounds of blows landing. She came tumbling out of the bedroom, thrown through the hallway and into the crib, waking John. She crawled out of the room as he started to cry, and Jack dragged her into the hallway and screamed at the baby to shut the fuck up. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I ran and grabbed the baby out of the crib, cuddling him and turning him away from the image of his dad, straddling his mom and choking her. The silence that settled in after was almost scarier than the screaming. I honestly couldn't tell whether she was dead or not. I got John settled in again and came back out into the living room. I didn't know what to do. Diane was laying there on the floor, broken, bleeding, and barely recognizable. I couldn't even tell if she was still breathing. Jack told me to sit down as he dialed the number on his cell phone. I slowly perched on the edge of the couch. Diane crawled to me then, gurgling words through blood. She begged me to protect her babies. I just kept thinking that I was just a kid too. Soon, a bunch of Jack's buddies arrived. A few of them said they would take Diane to the hospital. Jack asked if I would stay with the kids, but Diane started screaming that if I stayed there, he would rape and kill me. I told them I just wanted to go home. One of the guys said he would call his wife to come stay with the kids instead, and they left with Diane. Jack then looked over to me and told me to get in the car. He would be taking me home. I had no way to call for help or a different ride. The whole way home, I just tried to stay as calm as possible. The turn to my street was at the bottom of a dip. As we approached that turn, Jack just kept telling me over and over how he could not go back to prison. He would do anything to not go back. I kept nodding and agreeing as he took his foot off the brake and drove past the turn. I looked at him horrified. "I just want to talk. I need to calm down before I go home to my kids, okay?" We ended up at an all-night donut shop. He had coffee and a donut. He got me something too and spent more than the next hour telling me how he was not a bad guy. Prison had changed him. I was less than 5 kilometers from my home now, but I had no way to call for help, and no one knew where I was. I just tried to be supportive and agreed with everything he said. He paid me $50, which was a lot for back then. Finally, we got back into the car, and he drove me home after. It was one of the longest nights ever. I woke up to a police cruiser outside my house. Diane refused to press charges. About a week later, I got a letter from her apologizing for everything, taking all of the blame. Sometimes I wonder if he killed her in the end. I wonder if those kids somehow grew up to be good people, even with all of that going on around them. So yeah, that's the one reason why I made sure my daughter always had a way to call for help if anything happened. Last night, my roommate and I made a last-minute decision to go night swimming at the river in our city. It was around 8 p.m. or so there were still a few people hanging out in the area. It was extremely dark though. About 15 minutes after we arrived there, I saw a man shining his flashlight, seemingly looking for something near where we'd put our stuff. "Hey, keep an eye out on that guy," I said to my roommate semi-loud. The man obviously heard me say this and scurried away immediately. I began to feel a bit anxious at seeing this happen, but I waited a bit to say something else to my roommate. Eventually though, I did. We decided it was time to leave. We packed all our stuff up and began to walk up the staircase that led back to the parking lot, using our flashlights to see the steps. Out of the corner of my eye though, I saw a dark shadow dodge into some bushes at the very top and stop moving. I stopped immediately. I grabbed my roommate's arm and redirected them, and we started walking back down the stairs. I told my roommate what I'd seen at the top when we got to the bottom. She said it was probably just a tree blowing in the wind or something. I started, though, to get the strangest feeling in my stomach. I'd never felt anything like this before, ever. I just knew if we went back up those stairs, something bad was going to happen to both of us. I stood there at the bottom of those stairs and began to shine my light slowly up to the top, trying to see if I could see anyone there. Sure enough, for a brief moment, I could see the outline of a man hiding. As soon as the light hit him though, he ducked down behind the bushes once again. Obviously, I went into full-blown panic mode. I started looking for other people there, hoping someone could walk us to our car. Luckily, we found a couple not far away. They walked us to our car but seemed quite annoyed about it. When we got to the top of the steps though, the man who was hiding in the bushes was nowhere to be seen. A few hours after we got home, I got a notification on my Neighbors app, the Ring doorbell app that sends crime alerts for your area. Someone had been stabbed, only a few streets away from where we had been. I'm 100% certain this guy's intentions were bad. I don't know if he was planning on kidnapping us or robbing us or stabbing us. I just know something really bad would have happened if I hadn't been paying attention and we'd simply walked up those stairs. Not sure if he was the person that stabbed someone, but that notification just scared me even more. I'm still sick to my stomach because of all of this. This happened June 2018 in Portland, Oregon. I understand I acted like an idiot in this situation. Since then, I've become much more observant, cautious, and honestly more paranoid. This night, I had gone dancing with my friends. and was really drunk by midnight. Unfortunately, this is back when I had very little money. I realized you could save money by eating very little before going out, and it would take far fewer drinks to get drunk. It worked so well that I was barely able to even remember my friend ordering me an Uber ride home. My phone was dead, of course. I can vaguely recall them helping me into the car and telling me to get home safe. I don't even remember greeting the driver or the first minute or so of the ride. Soon after getting in, he asked me how my night was and if I smoked. Honestly, I was just thinking about bed at this point, so I sorta slurred out that I did sometimes. He then offered me a joint. This was the first moment I got real nervous and began paying attention. I told him I was really tired and just ready to get home instead. I think he said something about it being an indica-based joint and it making for a great sleep aid. Once again, I said something not exactly like no, but not a yes either. Well, he took that as, yes, I'll take that joint right now, please. Once again, I was drunk enough that I could barely even see or speak. So when he said, okay, well, I have to cancel the ride real quick. I can't give this to you while I'm on the clock. It took me a second to realize what was really going on. By the time I started to say something, he had canceled the ride and pulled over to the side of the road. We were now in an area just east of the Hawthorne Bridge. It was totally secluded, just empty parking lots and closed shops around, not a single person in sight. It was starting to hit me that I was now in the car not with an Uber driver, but with some stranger and I couldn't call anyone to help. He was also apparently trying to give me weed he'd rolled himself which could have anything in it. For the next minute or so, we were pretty quiet. I can't remember any small talk he tried to make. I was beginning to panic. I tuned nearly everything out. Every time he handed me the joint, I would take fake hits, just breathing it into my mouth and not into my lungs. I felt extremely tired, clumsy, and weak. That kind of drunk where you're almost to the point of nausea. I knew there wasn't really much of anything I could do to defend myself at this point. I remember being vividly fixated for a moment on the fact I didn't even have a pair of keys to defend myself with, as my building used fobs for just about everything. I didn't take my mail key with me either. As I was freaking out, I looked up to see if the man was noticing. I made eye contact with him in the mirror. I could see the entire time he was staring at me, but I couldn't read his expression. Finally though, he said something along the lines of, "Alright, well, let's get out of here now." I told him I'd just call another Uber to get home. I was thinking at this point it might just be safer to walk. No, I still got your address. I'll just take you home myself." For a moment, I was relieved. I guess I wanted to believe so badly that I would get home safe that I just believed him. I tried to calm down. After all, he hadn't actually done anything threatening. Maybe he was just a stoner guy and I was overreacting. At this time, I lived on PSU campus in downtown Portland, in the southwest area of the city. He was driving me north on the east side of the river. There were several bridges to our left. He kept moving north though. He had several opportunities to take an exit to hop over the river and get me back downtown, but he kept on skipping them. We passed bridge after bridge that could get me home. Up in northeast Portland, there are some large industrial areas that get very isolated at night. Portland is also surrounded by a lot of forests. I knew he was taking me to a secluded area. After he passed the fourth exit for a bridge, pretty sure it was the Broadway Bridge, I was racking my brain for a way to make him actually take me home. "Hey, my boyfriend is waiting for me, so can we get on track?" This was true, though I said it in a very meek way. The man didn't say anything. He did take the next exit for a bridge though, and basically hung a giant U-turn that started actually taking me home. Even as we were on the west side of town heading south, I was still shaking. I had my hand on the door handle, thinking about hopping out at a red light the closer we got to my apartment. My phone was completely dead. And honestly, there were still several chances to hop onto nearby highways and speed out of the city. We were getting close to my apartment now though. Once again, I tried to convince myself I was just being paranoid. Maybe some stoner that was too high to navigate the city or something. I was so scared I was almost crying. Once we got about 2 blocks away from my apartment, I lied and told him it was easiest to stop here, He could just let me out. Again, he didn't say anything. He did slow down the car. I was flooded with relief and could even feel myself smiling. When I went to open the door though, I realized it was locked. I tried to lift the lock mechanism manually, but it wouldn't budge at all. I looked up at him instinctively to see what was happening. He had his head turned almost fully toward me, shoulders still facing the road, giving me the most sinister smile I had ever seen. It was so smug and mocking, and it didn't reach his eyes at all. I just started crying and begging him to open the door. I was freaked out and very drunk. After a moment of watching me cry, he finally did unlock it. I never forgot that sensation of vulnerability though, not just being drunk in his car with no way to contact anyone, but even as I got out, I kept feeling like he would grab the back of my shirt and pull me back in. When I got home, I found out my boyfriend had actually gone out with friends last minute and wasn't even there. He wouldn't even have known till much later that I hadn't gotten back safe. The next day, I convinced myself I was just freaking out over nothing. In my gut though, I had truly felt in danger the night before. Technically, this guy could have been totally harmless, but I still think I should have texted my friend and had her report him. The big thing that made me think of this though was recently hearing about how Ed Kemper, the co-ed killer, would go for practice runs, picking up hitchhikers and seeing if he could get the passengers and potential victims to trust him and how far out of his comfort zone he could push them without them saying anything. Obviously, this guy was not Ed Kemper, but I hate wondering if that night was a practice run of sorts for that Uber driver. Anyway, thanks to whoever reads this whole thing through, I'm at a point in my life where I'm realizing how much danger I put myself in when I was younger and just depressed as hell. It's made me both surprised and deeply grateful I'm still here at all.